Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this short session on program monitoring. So, if my voice is not audible in between, you let me know. Praveen, I hope the screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, it is visible and audible also.
Okay, okay, thank you. Okay, so in the previous modules, no, we got a brief overview of monitoring. So, but this module, the entire module is dedicated on program monitoring. So, in this module, we will learn a lot more about monitoring. So, what we are monitoring in a program, how we should monitor it, how we should track the progress of the program, and then see program monitoring involves a lot of data collection. So, how you collect your data, from where you should collect your data. Then once the data is with you, then how you should analyze it, and then how you should make use of your analysis to inform program decisions. So this module is all about these few things. So before we start, if anyone wants to share a little bit about your understanding about what's program monitoring in one or two sentences, you can go ahead. I think, Praveen, it's possible for participants to unmute and speak, right?
Yes, I will enable that.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay, so we have seen, as I said in the previous modules, that program monitoring is all about what you say, an ongoing and routine collection and analysis of the data of your activities. So that will help you to measure the progress that you are making towards your project's results, and at the same time, that will help the program to make adjustments and maybe take course corrections and things like that. So that is the purpose of program monitoring. And what are the advantages of program monitoring? Why we should do this? Because this helps us to know whether we are implementing things as it is planned at the outset of the program. Are we making that progress? Are we doing things on time? And are we achieving whatever we have set out to achieve? And whether we are on time, because projects have got clear timelines for and milestones. So and it's very important that you do your things on time and within resources. So regular monitoring of your program helps you to know this, whether you are implementing things as planned and whether you are on track on time. And so what we really monitor, it is very important to understand in a program, what are the things that we have to monitor. So you all must be by now familiar with the logical framework of the project, which we discussed in one of the previous modules. So all these blocks that you can see on the screen, these are part of your logical framework. So within the logical framework, monitoring focuses on these two things. That is, one is activities and the outputs. So, during the previous modules also, there were a lot of references about the hand hygiene project. So in that also, like if you see the activities to train healthcare workers on hand hygiene practices. So that is your activity. And your output is how many people you trained. So you track whether the training took place as it was planned, and as an output of your training, whether you train the intended number of participants. So monitoring starts once you start implementing the project, and then it goes on till you complete the project. So And this focuses mainly on the activities and outputs. But there are certain inputs also in that the donors monitor. You know that the grant money, the resources, that's also an input. So in most of the projects, you have to report your burn rate, I mean the spend rate of your grant, that also to the donor. But that is a separate kind of reporting. But that is also monitored. That's what I wanted to highlight. And then there is something called outcome monitoring. Though I said monitoring focuses primarily on the output. So some of the outcome also we monitor. Again, if we go back to the hand hygiene training example, so in that, once people are trained, so you try to understand whether there is any increase in their knowledge level, in the knowledge level of healthcare workers about good hand hygiene practices. So to check that, I mean, that is an outcome, immediate outcome of the project. So looking at your pre and post test scores, no, you can really make a comparison whether there is an improvement in the knowledge level. So that is a kind of outcome monitoring. And you know that outcome monitoring is not possible like in all kind of programs, because all these indicators may not be that easy to collect. So you can do this wherever collection of indicators is easy. And you remember the concept of feasibility that we learned in one of the previous modules. So what we are trying to say, monitoring is a regular activity. I mean, that is an ongoing activity throughout the implementation period of your project. And the frequency may vary. Like some of the things that you have to monitor on a daily basis, certain other things on a weekly basis. Then there are some other indicators that you report on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, then certain things once in 6 months. So it all depends upon how your project is designed, what are the needs of your stakeholders, your donors. So depending upon all these, I mean, the frequency of your monitoring varies. Okay, now let's see the steps involved in conducting a program monitoring. So there are 3 steps involved in that. The first phase is planning, then the second phase is implementation, and third phase is the review and use of data mainly. So let's briefly discuss these 3 steps. So the first phase is planning. And planning involves 2 major steps, activities in that. One is the development of an M&E plan. So by now, I'm sure that all of you are familiar with the M&E plan, because as part of the previous module assignment, all of you have developed an M&E plan on that hand hygiene project, I think. So you are familiar with this. So I'm not going to spend time on discussing the hand hygiene, the M&E plan. So we will focus on the data flow plan. So once you have your M&E plan in place, you have to do a data flow plan. So a data flow plan visually maps the flow of data and results. So you have people implementing your program in the field, and then there may be, if you're working in a particular state, you may be having your field staff spread across the district. Then at the state level, you must be having a small group of people who monitor the activities that is happening in the field. Then that team, the state team, must be reporting to some other, I mean, their higher ups in the base, maybe based in the national capital, or maybe if that's a state level organization, then they may be reporting directly to the donor. So In this, no, you have to clearly define the data flow. So it starts from the field, then it goes to the state team. So from there to the higher ups or to the donors. So that is called the data flow. Now, I know that many of you are familiar with the ART program. So you know how the ART centers function. So if you look at the data flow in an ART program, so there also you see the data manager who is responsible for compiling the report at the end of every month. So it starts there. So actually, a lot of people contribute to that. You know that the council has got the councilor's set of data, the pharmacist has got it, then the nurse fills a lot of registers. So every staff has got some or the other registers or tool to maintain. So the data manager extracts relevant information from different tools and put it together in the MPR. Then the MPR goes to the State AIDS Control Society. So the M&E person who is at the SACS reviews it, and if he finds some flaw or some inaccuracy in the report, then he writes back. He picks up the phone and talk to the data manager, or he sends a mail saying that no, these things are not right or these things are not matching. So you have to check it. So at that time, the data manager again looks into the things, the records, tools, registers, and then rectify things, then send it back to the SACS. Then from SACS, they share the report with NACO. So that is what we mean by the data flow. So once you design the data flow plan, you have to clearly define like who will do what and at what level, as we just discussed. Now, what should be done at the data manager's level, what should be done at the SACS level, then what should be done at the NACO level, then the timelines, everything you need to. So each and every person involved in the program implementation must be clear about collecting data, then reporting it on time. So this data flow document, I mean, even if you must be deciding it in the beginning of the project, but it is not a it's not something that you develop once and for all. But as program evolves, uh, you may have to relook into it, you may have to revise it, and it is a living document. So that's what I'm trying to say. I think the screen has gone. I will share again. Praveen, is it visible now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So that's the data flow plan. Then let's see the next phase, that is implementation. So once you start implementation, you have to track the program indicators on a whatever frequency that you decide. It can be weekly, monthly, or quarterly. So you track the indicators. Then you have to, so you'll be generating this data, compiling it on a monthly or quarterly basis. Then what you need to do, you have to analyze and and summarize this data for the program purposes. So that is the second phase, and that is an ongoing thing as long as you implement the project. And then comes the third phase, that is the review and use of your data. So again, there are two steps, two key activities. One is you have to hold regular data review meetings as a team. So when we visit ART centers, we tell them that once you generate your MPR, once you have your draft MPR ready, you have to sit together as a team, and then you have to look into it. You have to review it as a team before sending it to the SAC. So if there are any errors that can be rectified before you send the final report, that can be done at that level. So we always encourage that. So it's not only about the ART centers, be in whatever setting like you are working in. It is important that once you have your data generated, sitting together as a team, looking into it, reviewing it thoroughly, before you sending it to your donor or to the government stakeholder, whoever it is. So that's important. You have to have regular data review meetings, and a lot of action points will emerge out of your data review meeting. So it is important that you execute those action points identified from your data review. So to sum up the tracking and reviewing of your data, I mean your monitoring, that helps you to see at regular intervals what is going well in your program, then what are the successes, then what are the challenges or issues that are existing in the field, what you can do to address them, and if whether there is any adjustment that is required in the program. So regular review of data, that really helps you to achieve all this. So here they're talking about a few tools that you can use to track M&E progress. So, we have documentation softwares like Microsoft Word, then spreadsheet like MS Excel. Then we have more advanced data visualization softwares like Tableau, then Power BI, things like that. So, I mean, depending upon the level at which you are working, the requirement of the project. So you can use any of these tools to generate your reports. And the sources of program monitoring data. So now you have your tools, you have your indicators, everything ready. So from where this data comes? So it comes from program documents, like if you're doing a training program, the participant list that tells you how many people were trained. And if you are distributing something like be it ART or hand sanitizers or bed nets, whatever. So there is a supply distribution log from where you will get the details. Or if it's about conducting meetings with the community, so then you will have the details from the meeting minutes. Then if you're distributing something, then there are receipts. So there are a lot of sources from where you can get your monitoring data. Then if it is a health facility based program, so you have things like registration logs, healthcare encounter logs. So you just again think in the context of the ART centers, you have details of people visiting your center, then their white card, the information in their white card, then the counseling registers, the drug dispensing registers. There are a lot of sources for the data. Okay, so far we have been talking about collecting the data, I mean the sources, from where it comes, how you should use it, all that. So now in the coming few slides, we will see how to analyze the data. So in this we will see the descriptive analysis, then how to visualize your data, then key data visualization principles, and all. So what is descriptive analysis? So that is a way of summarizing the quantitative data using frequencies, percentages, averages, etc. And this is called these frequencies, percentages, averages. No? I mean, this is called the descriptive statistics. And that helps you, the descriptive statistics, that helps you to summarize your data, get a snapshot of your program, and identify patterns in the data. So these are some of the softwares that you can use to analyze your quantitative data. So you have Excel, SPSS, R, Stata. So there are a lot of options, but Excel is the most commonly used in our program settings because it is readily available and it is relatively easy to use. And what is data visualization? So it is the graphical representation of data. So and it will make it makes it easier for the viewer to understand what you are trying to say. So you can use bar charts, line graphs, then heat charts, bubble charts, and a lot of options are there. So depending upon the context and the need of the project, you can use any of these options to visualize your data. So then there are a few principles of data visualization. So that is, you have to be accurate, you have to keep it simple, and your data should tell a story. Let's see these three principles one by one briefly. So it's about the first one is it's about being accurate. So this is just a compliance rate of a particular organization over a period of 4 or 5 years. So what is the issue that you are finding in this chart? Can any of the participants just unmute the mic and then share? What are the issues in this? Why do you think this is not accurate? Any volunteers? You can even use the chat box. Okay, so I'm not getting any response. So these are the things, I mean, mainly like if you look at the y-axis of the chart on the left side, so you can see it does not start at zero, and the grid lines, no, I mean, that is the increment between each grid line is that of a very small value, like 0.002%. So that's what practically there is no increase in the compliance rate over the 5 years. On the other hand, if you look at the chart on the right hand side, so it starts at zero, and between the grid lines, there is a 0.5% increase. So that is a better way of presenting the data, and you know that I mean there is not much progress in terms of the compliance. So that's the first principle: be accurate, and next is the second principle is keep it simple. So you can see a chart in this slide. So in many of the meetings, you must have seen people presenting data like this, which I mean, which you won't understand anything about. So this is not the way of presenting data. So now you see the next image on the slide. So this is very simple. You can read it yourself. You see, this is the HIV prevalence data of our country. So, and they have just highlighted the states with adult HIV prevalence that is above the national average. So you have the national average is 0.22%. So you have another 9 states that are having HIV prevalence much more than the national average. So that is what this is trying to say, and this is very simple. And easy to understand. So when you present your data, it should be simple. So you have to remove all the unnecessary information from your data visualization, and the viewer. You have to get the viewer to focus on the most important aspects of the data, and most importantly, whatever you're trying to present, that should focus on just one idea or one story. And the third principle is tell a story. So whatever you present, I mean, your graph or your chart, so that should tell a story, a powerful story. So I have taken it from this chart from a NACO document. So this shows how India's free antiretroviral therapy program progressed over the years. As many of you know, India started free ART in the year 2004. So in 2005, you can see we were having, so the bars are about the number of PLHIV on ART, and then on top of that, there is a line chart, so which shows you the scale up of ART centers over the years. So what this graph is trying to say, so in March 2005, there were 25 ART centers catering to merely 6,000, close to 7,000 people living with HIV. So which has grown up to, you see, by March 2017, there are 531 ART centers catering to more than 1 million people living with HIV. So that is what this slide is trying to say. So just like this, whatever data you present, I mean, there should be a story behind it. And it should be easy for the viewer to understand what you are trying to say. So now we will see some of the common descriptive statistics used in monitoring. There are three, like frequencies, percentages, and average. So first, let's see frequencies. So frequencies that actually count the number of observations or occurrences. And most of your indicators are like frequency based. Once if you go through this, you realize that. So you see the number of times an activity conducted, like the hand hygiene training, for example, or number of people or groups reached. So if you're doing an outreach program, you're trying to track back people who are lost to follow up from your ART center. So end of the day, you tell your higher authorities, no, what is the number of people you reached in the field, or if it is a training program, what is the number of people you trained. So these all are occurrences or number of items that you distributed, be it bed nets or hand wash refill jars. It can be anything. So these are all indicators that depend on frequencies. And you calculate frequencies just by counting or adding the number of observations for a particular indicator. So in this course, along with all these lectures on frequency, averages, and also there is an Excel practice also, so which we haven't included here because of the time constraints. But these are what they are trying to teach. I mean, they are simple things which most of you are aware of, like finding the sum, finding the averages, using COUNTIF, things like that. So try to look at those portions also of the module. So again, then they are showing some of the effective ways to visualize the frequency data. So you can use tables to do that. You can use bar charts, that is also vertical or horizontal. And this is a frequency data, like number of health workers trained till date in a health facility, by health facility. So this is a project that must be happening in maybe 2023. So the Q3 reports. So once you generate this data, once you have this data ready with you, what issues you would be interested to discuss with the program team, I mean, with your organization? So you can see, I mean, you can simply, it is easy to understand. Half of the facilities haven't met the target. So the target is 30. So half of your facilities haven't met the target. There are 2 sites where nobody is trained, and 1 center is very close to the target, where they train 28 people, and another center like DASH, where it is just above 50%. So you just know these figures, but you do not know, I mean, being a data person, you may not know the background. So when you check with your program people, then they tell you like the 2 sites where it is 0, maybe their trainings are scheduled as per the project implementation plan. Their trainings may be scheduled for the Q4, the last quarter. So that is why it is 0 there. And the facility where 28 people are trained, that may be sufficient, or that is the number of staff available in those places. So you get a lot of insights from the implementers once you share this kind of an analysis with them. So to sum up, frequency data helps us to understand several things. So that includes whether you're meeting your targets, and or if not, whether you're on track to being met, and you can also do comparisons across groups, and you can also see the frequencies of individuals, groups, etc. Next is percentages. So percentage, I don't have to explain what is percentage. So some of the indicators that that depend on calculating percentage are like percentage of individuals or groups reached through a program. Now, I think all of you are familiar with the 90-90-90 targets of India. So it means you have to 90% of the people living with HIV, they should know their status, and out of that 90% of the people, they should be on ART, and 90% of them should be virally suppressed. So it's all regardless of the actual number in the field. So now you see our HIV estimates are somewhere around 21 lakhs or something. So that number can vary. So it can become 22 lakhs tomorrow, or it can become 20 lakhs also. But regardless of those numbers, your target is to have 90% of the people like tested, put on ART, and virally suppressed. So these things are these kind of indicators. I mean, they depend a lot on percentages and percentage of individuals or groups that meet a target or qualification. Again, if you go back to your hand hygiene training thing, so there after the training, you look at the post-test scores, and then you try to see what is the percentage of increase in the knowledge level. So if it is just 20% at the pre-test, then if you see it going up to 60% or 70%, so that means then there is an increase in the knowledge level of the participants. So this is again a line chart using percentages. So what this is trying to say, the number of health facilities received hands-off refill jars from January to June. So here also you can see like in January it was 100%, then it started decreasing. So, and it came to a lowest point in April, so it was 50%. Then again it started going up. So again, as we discussed earlier, in this case also, being a data person, you may not know what actually what going on in the field. They may be facing challenges in sending these refill jars to the health facility. There may be a flood or anything like any such hindrances can be there. So then in that case, once you have this data, then you have to sit with your program team, and then you should try to understand like what are the reasons that led to this, why we have not been able to achieve the targets for quite a long time. And these are some of the effective ways to visualize your percentage data. So you can use bar charts, vertical, horizontal. And another advantage of using percentage for your analysis, like it really helps you to standardize comparison across different sizes. So let's see how that's possible. Now you see there are two facilities, facility A and facility B, and number of people trained. So in facility A, 5 people are trained, and in facility B, 20 people are trained. So when you look at these absolute numbers, you will say, wow, facility B, I mean, they did a good job. They trained 20 people, whereas facility A is far behind. But when you really look at the denominator, the number of people that you have to train. So then you see, like at the facility A, there are only 10 people. And out of 10 people, they already trained 5, and their achievement is 50%. But at facility B, their target is 100, and they trained only 20, which is 20%. Now you see the difference. So applying this percentage, that helps you to clearly do this kind of a standardized comparison across different sizes. So when groups or units are of different sizes, this percent data can provide more meaningful comparison. And to sum up, percentage data can help you to highlight a lot of things. So that includes whether you're meeting your targets, or whether you are on track of meeting your targets. And as we just discussed, now you can standardize comparisons across groups or units. Next is averages. So to calculate averages, we normally use mean or median. And mean is calculated by calculating the value of the total of all the values, and then you divide it by the number of values. Whereas median, you organize the values from smallest to largest, and then you take the middle point of those values. So let's just see how this is done. So this is about calculating mean. So this is community AA, and there are 5 households in community AA. And the household size, that really varies from 2 to 14. So there are households having as less as 2 and then as large as 14. So how you calculate the mean? So you just take a sum of all this, 2 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 14. So that is 25. Then you divide 25 by the total values. So that is number of households in this case. So that is 5. And then you come out with the mean, which is 5. So you can say that in community A, the average, the mean, the household size is 5. Whereas in median, so what we do, we arrange the values from smallest to largest, and then you pick the midpoint. So here it is. Here in this case, it is 3. So 3 is the median. Now you must have noticed there is a difference in mean and median in this case. Mean is 5, whereas median is 3. So what happens here, mean is more sensitive to the extremes in your data. If you look at the community AA5, I mean, there the household size is 14, which is something unusual for a community where the household size is just 2 or 3, 4 between these numbers for the rest of the houses, but just one house is having 14 members in that. So that is an unusual number. So in this mean calculation is affected by the mean is sensitive to this. So that is why you have 5 as your mean at the same time, 3 as your median. So just because of this, generally what we have seen, the statisticians and all, they prefer median over mean because it is not affected by the unusual or the extreme values. Then we have minimum and maximum. So minimum, it's the lowest number of the data set, and maximum, that's the highest number. Again, we can go back to the household size in 4 different communities. So community A to community DD. So you can see in community A, the average, that is 5. And the spread is from 2 to 14. Those are the families with 2 members to 14 members. And in community DD, it is 3 to 6, the minimum spread, just from 3 to 6. So calculating minimum and maximum, that helps you to see the spread in the data set. So you can see in community A that it has the largest spread from 2 to 14. And in community DD, it has the smallest spread, just between 3 and 6. So there are a lot of indicators that depend on averages. So, like program participants, when you conduct a training, so in that you will see the average age of the participants, or the average education level of the participants, the average income. It can be done in any program or any setting. When in the ART centers also, you see the average age of people getting registered for treatment in a particular year, or the average education level of those people, or the average income. So it can be done in any setting, any program. Then characteristics of settings. So average client load of target health facilities. So like if you are working in an ART center, you must be monitoring this. What is the average number of people visiting your center in a day? And for the households, like an ART center that may be catering to multiple districts sometimes. So what is the average household distance to the nearest? For the clients, what is the average distance to the health facility? So you can look at those things. Then program activities, so average number of outreach activities that your program conducts in a week. Then for a clinic, what is the average number of clients seen by the clinician per day? Then the average score, like the increase from pre-test to the post-test. So all these things, to understand more about all these things, you always do, you look at the averages. And average helps us to better understand a population that is made up of individual experiences and observations. Like each person varies, his experience, his observations, his knowledge level, everything varies. So this kind of an analysis, that helps you to understand the population better. And you can use tables, you can use charts, and a lot of other options are there, even line charts, and you can use a lot of such visualizations to present your average data. So this is a line chart just showing you the average number of clients seen per day. So you can see maybe in the beginning of the month there is more, but towards the end of the month maybe it is decreasing. You can make your assumptions out of it. So whatever visualization you choose, be it a line chart or graph or pie chart or donut chart, whatever. So it should convey the message that you are trying to communicate in the best way possible. So now we are going back to the data review meetings we were talking about in the beginning. So once you have your data, your reports ready, you have to sit together as a team. You have to review the data. You have to reflect on it. And you have to see what are the areas where you were successful and what were the risks. Like now this is the corona pandemic time. So if you are, most of us are program implementers, and you know that your work is affected because of corona, the lockdown, and also, and this will help you to identify such issues and maybe come up with a mitigation plan. So these are some of the steps that you have to take while you prepare for the data review meeting. So if you are the one who is coordinating a meeting, you should notify all those whom you want to attend that meeting. I mean, all those who are concerned with that project or program. So you should inform them, you should notify them about this data review meeting. You should tell them when you are planning to do this meeting and for how long, for 1 hour or 2 hours or for the entire afternoon, and where you're planning to hold this meeting and who all are expected to attend. Then what is the agenda of your meeting? So unfortunately, most of our meetings in the organization settings happens without a clear agenda. So you have to have a clear agenda with the objectives and what you expect out of that meeting. So all these things should be clearly spelled out when you're planning to have a data review meeting. So then next is the flow of the meeting. So once you are once you are in the meeting, once you start the meeting, how it should flow. So ideally, all the meetings should start with a recap of the last meeting, just to see what were the things that you discussed during the last meeting, what were the issues that you identified. Then you must have developed some action points also at that time. So what is the action taken status? So this will ensure a continuity actually, like from the previous meeting to the present meeting and whatever meetings you are going to have in the future. So there will be a continuity. So you have to see the action taken status. Then you have to present the data. You have to see the pattern, the successes, the targets not met, the reasons for that. And then you have to give time to the participants to ask questions. And if they want to clarify something, they should be able to do that also. Then you should also share the lessons learned during the implementation, during that particular reporting period. What are the best practices that you have come up with? And what are the benefits of having such data review meetings? So it helps you to learn from your mistakes and solve if there are any challenges. Like you can sit together as a team and come up with a plan to address those challenges. And if there are some areas where you see good progress but not enough resources, then you can direct your resources towards that particular component of your program. Then if there are gaps in implementation, so you can identify those gaps and you can come up with a plan to address the gap. Then this is also an opportunity for you to take program decisions. If there are important policy decisions required, then you can take it up to the to people at the higher level. So these are the benefits of data review meeting. And what you should do after you are done with the data review meeting. So you have to prepare a documentation with action points and then send it to all those who participated in the meeting. Then once you review the data, then you will have to complete, you have to do the progress report for that time period. It can be a month or a quarter. So then with the input of all the team members, as a team, you can work on the progress report for that quarter or the month. Then external data review meetings. Some of the organizations, they do external review meetings also. It may not be very common or very frequent, but meetings do happen. So in this, people involved in such meetings include the beneficiaries of the program. Now, most of us are working with HIV programs. You know how strong is the presence of the program beneficiaries, the PLHIV community, all the meetings that we do, all the decision making things that we do. So the program beneficiaries, they are present in the external data review meeting, the government stakeholders, then your donors. So in the external data review meeting, all these parties are involved. And these meetings are less frequent than your internal data review meeting. And for the external meeting, you don't have to, it need not be a very detailed, need not be the kind of meeting that you do internally. You don't have to get into the details. You don't have to review all the indicators. So you have to select what is relevant to this audience. And a benefit of having this external data review is that you can build understanding and ownership over the project by your stakeholders, and they will also help you to troubleshoot challenges. So if you need the help of your government stakeholder to address something, so then once they get to know about this particular challenge, they come out and help you with this. And if you are having challenges, then they are there to help you out to address those challenges. So these are some of the benefits of having external data review meetings. So that is the end of this presentation. So if if you want to, add anything to it, or if you want to share anything, or if you have any questions, you can ask now. And as part of this module, you have an activity that is you have an assignment that is on a clinical mentorship program. So they have the data visualizations and all. There are certain questions that you need to answer on that, and then there is a quiz also. So in addition to that, in addition to these lectures, you know that there are a lot of stories from the field as part of the module. So you have to listen to those stories also. That will help you to understand more about program monitoring. So if there are any questions, participants can unmute and speak. Otherwise, we can wind up. Okay, thank you then. We can wind up. Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, everyone, for participating.